Hello there, I'm a fruit lion, and I'm a hybrid, just like Dingodile. Welcome to the world of Crash Team Rumble. Support for this game may have stopped officially, but I have no intention of doing the same. And therefore, in an effort to keep this wonderful game going strong, I'm here to teach you how to be Chonks. I've been playing as Dingodile since the beta days of Rumble, and while I can't say that I'm the best player as him, in fact I know there are much better players than me, I can at least say that I know his fundamentals and nature more than most. Dingodile is slow, which is odd considering how nippy he is in Crash 4 It's About Time, but he's extremely satisfying to master in combat. The closest examples to his playstyle that I can think of are a blend of Reinhardt and Roadhog in Overwatch, and he shares their muscles and guts too. Dingodile's mobility means he wants to find an area that he can threaten and park his ample bottom squarely upon it. This area is usually the enemy team's Wumper Bank, but it can vary from stage to stage. For example, at the start of the stage, you can often go help your team capture the gem clusters. You act very much like the goalkeeper in football, keeping the enemy team from banking any Wumper and making it hard for them to even look at their bank, never mind stand on it. Because the moment you don't... Never leave the bank, never leave the bank, never leave the bank, never leave the bank. While the rest of your team runs around collecting items, triggering power-ups, and trying to score, Dingo very much tries to prevent most of these from happening. Sometimes he'll get a break and go and collect stuff too, and when your team takes a big lead, he can help secure it. But for the most part, his objective is to pick fights. In the event that he can't actually win the fight, and believe me that's more common than you might think, he can at the very least give his opponents one hell of a distraction. His belly. If all of this strikes your fancy, then great, stick around, order a takeaway from Dingo's Diner, and we'll start with the basics. Dingodile is available to play as soon as you start playing Rumble. He's one of the easiest characters to pick up and just get going with, but that doesn't mean that his moves don't require some nuance. Of course, he comes equipped with a heavy and floppy jump. He can hover by pressing the X button a second time. Once the hover pack reaches its limit of about 1 second of uptime, or you release the button, he'll gain a little burst of air. Hovering makes you slightly faster than just walking, giving you a little push of momentum when you need it, such as if a flytrap spitter is slowing you down. You can also just mash the X button to double jump like everyone else. It's worth adding that Dingo can do a little damage to anyone beneath him when hovering. Sometimes it can even secure a kill. Essentially, that's because the hover behaves similar to his vacuum ability. I have mine mapped to the circle button as I find it easier to use in a pinch. By holding the button down, you can suck up Wumper and relics alike. It doesn't slow your movement keeping this ability active, so make a habit of using it outside of combat as much as during. If you can keep the vacuum trained on an enemy, you'll slow them down a great deal and do damage over time. Generally, this should be used to finish off a weakened enemy who is trying to out-waddle you, but it can also help set up your teammates for an attack too.
Then he waddled away, waddle waddle, till the very next day, bum 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 bum.
That move is not to be confused with Dingo's other vacuum-based ability, and a very important one at that, the Vac Pull, in which Dingo creates a large cone ahead of himself. After a wind-up of roughly half a second, anyone in range of the cone that isn't blue will dabba-dee-dabba die! I'm kidding, of course, it's not an instant kill move, but it does a serious amount of damage when you press the button again, while also blasting enemies away from you. You can follow up with a different attack if you prefer, or do nothing at all.
Nothing at all! Nothing at all!
Why do nothing? Because the opponent you pulled briefly stays stunned, and if they're hanging over a cliff ledge, well... The catch is, after you vac pull someone, you can't pull and stun them again for around 3 seconds. However, you can always do damage with the follow-up blast, no matter what. This move is very powerful, but don't over-rely on it for heaven's sake. Too often do I see new Dingos just spam this move because the bots keep walking into it. And worse still, they use it from a standing position. If you jump or hover just before pulling, momentum will carry Dingodile forward, increasing the vertical and horizontal range of the pull cone. Be careful in mid-air. If you mash the attack button, you can cause yourself to drop off a cliff because of the recoil from the pull, immobilizing our resident Chonk. We are all guilty of this, so don't worry if it happens to you every so often. One of the many follow-up attacks you can use from a vac pull is Dingo's Spin Attack. This attack has quite short range, but is very spammable and can lock people in place if they refuse to back away from you. This is your go-to attack for outpacing the enemy, particularly airborne ones.
It doesn't leave you too open, so mix it up with a vac pole every so often. A clever trick is to use this attack immediately after a hover jump in order to interrupt a Crash or Coco about to body slam. Often you'll find that they've been mashing the button and they'll drop themselves to their dooms instead. The big bread and butter of Dingo's moveset though is his super spin. I've saved the best attack for last. This move is going to get a lot of use. The most important thing about it is that it greatly increases Dingo's movement speed. Get into a habit of using it to reach places quicker, and use your momentum following it to increase your jumps, spins, and vac pulls for more distance. The speed also allows Dingo to dance around gem platforms and around enemy powers, such as Greg here. A lot of enemies will slam down a Greg or hide behind a friendly one and think, "Ew, look at me, I'm safe behind this alien's ample posterior," and then you can simply super spin around Greg like, no. The super spin just takes shy of a second to fully charge and has distinct rhythm to it. It can push through many opposing moves like Coco's spiral spin, and is one of the only moves that can make Brio's brute form flinch. It can also go through some relic station powers, including the bouncing bubble, Junker Ball, and the beach ball. Crucially, you can cancel the super spin by pressing square again. You're not able to hover during it, so don't get caught out over a pit.
I never learned how to read!
The top of the spin has a deceptively large vertical hitbox, so you can jump towards enemies to juggle them, or clip through their attacks from beneath. Plus, you can even extend how long the spin lasts by jumping. In fact, any air time can extend the spin, such as these air vents in the caverns. Cancel the spin if you've been using it for traversal and see some incoming enemies, if you need to hover urgently, if you're about to face a big wall of projectiles, or your opponent is catching on and has a move that can counter it. Throw off their timing and make them adapt to your ever-changing attacks. As good as this move is for getting around and crowd control, overusing it will only make you predictable in the long run. Behave like a boxer, a big cuddly boxer, who also knows hot cuisine.
Let's dance!
Next, we're going to talk about the ideal powers to equip the Dingodile. Fridge. Eat everything in the fridge. Eat the Bandicoot too, for good measure. Okay, there's more to it than that, I admit. But we will start with the healing fridge because it's a surefire winner for Dingo's best power. Being so big that he's easy to hit, jiggle, and juggle, he can be KO'd fast despite having a larger health pool than average. The fridge is like your own extra teammate. Triggering it not only gives you a quick burst of health, it provides a distraction that your enemies must address if they hope to take you down. You can carry up to 2 and receive more from KOs than knocking away Wumper. Placing the fridge in a good spot is vital to get the most out of it. Some good spots include a little out of the way at the bank, forcing your opponents to leave the bank to go after it, which stops them from scoring for a while and can make them vulnerable to your attacks. Remember, if you cannot KO them, you absolutely must distract the enemy as long as you can, and that's where the fridge shines. There are also high spots and ledges that you can place the fridge on. Try here on Rusted Refinery on these gem platforms. It's just enough range to reach onto the bank below and forces enemies to go up and destroy it. Placing the fridge right in the middle of the bank every so often is a solid enough strategy, but not all the time. It's quite easy to blow up there. You should place it there every so often for 2 reasons. 1, to help you block a devastating attack. 2, and more importantly, to hop atop it as a platform. Up here, it's much easier to charge up your super spin in the thick of a fight. A single super spin can cause multiple opponents to go flying this way, even if your fridge were to be destroyed instantly. Here are some spots to avoid putting the fridge. On top of most relic stations, they don't slow down your opponents from banking relics, and they give them something to play with while they're at it. Don't put it on top of gems too often either. While it can block the placement of other powers such as the Flytrap Spitter, it's easy to destroy and just encourages your opponent to stay on the gems. And please do not put a fridge in the middle of an enemy garbage dump. It will instantly become one with the garbage. If your team already has a dedicated fridge user to come and help you out, you can also get a lot of mileage from bounce crates. Dingo already has some solid crowd control, but in the event that, say, he can't charge up a super spin safely, the exploding crates not only give him some wiggle room, but they're a free spin charge while you're up there. On rare occasions, you can use them during a super spin to chase an opponent that you knocked quite far away for another hit. And they're wonderful on maps with a lot of verticality, such as Rusted Refinery, to get up to the gem platforms quickly. Perhaps most importantly though, these can turn around some of your worst matchups, Dr. Cortex and Torna. You can still use them if Cortex transforms you, and you can use them quite quickly if Torna's hookshot stuns you, so give them a nasty surprise and a good follow-up attack as the crates blast them away. Let's have a quick gander at the other powers and how Dingo interacts with them. We'll go through them in the order that they're listed in the game. Flytrap spitters, they don't really benefit Dingo too much. Although they can provide a distraction just like the fridge, Dingo has enough presence and control that the slowdown effect doesn't really help him much. Bank Portal does nothing to help Dingo. He usually has no intention of moving from his place of defense in the first place. Besides, we like watching him waddle. Greg is an interesting one. I've seen some Dingo swear by it, and I get why. It's amazing at wasting your opponent's time and lets you deal with threats off the bank more safely. It's worth reminding you that an enemy Greg should hardly bother Dingo at all, as he can super spin around him and out-heal any damage with the healing fridge. Do not equip Wumperstash as Dingo, or I will personally hunt you down and have him eat you. Which I know won't deter some of you, but seriously, don't do it. It grants absolutely no combat advantages to you or your team. Garbage Dump is the emergency pick if you love but can't use Greg for any reason. I'm personally not too fond of it on Dingo, not even compared to Greg, but it wastes time and that's always useful. Unlike Greg, however, it can't knock opponents away or give you a place to take cover. Power Drain has been growing on me lately, but not enough to fully recommend it. It's a huge distraction, can take care of enemy pesky plants, and has an enormous range, meaning enemies have to venture further away from the bank to get rid of it. Unfortunately, its effect is quite slow and it takes a long time to charge. Were it any better, I'd give it more of a chance. Dingo already gets enough grief from enemy sticky TNTs without sticking them to himself. You can happily tank an enemy TNT with the fridge to spare your teammates from the blast, but there's absolutely no circumstances you'd want to equip this to yourself. You already make people's eyes explode with your looks after all. However, I actually learned a sneaky trick courtesy of one of my clan teammates. Assuming ping and lag don't affect things, your super spin can actually deny a stick if you back off after the initial hit. I can't wait to try this myself. And finally, Minefield. I actually really appreciated my teammates bring this along. You can hop onto the mines for some clever attacks and free charges, and you have plenty of moves to knock your opponents into the bombs. On Dingo himself though, they're a bit slow to put down and he has enough power on his own. They're a lovely bonus, but not essential. It's worth adding that against enemy minefields, Dingo can sweep his vacuum in circles in order to detonate the bombs instantly. In general, you can take Dingo to any stage and he'll do just fine. However, he does benefit from some stages more than others, so next up we're going to have a very extensive talk about every stage and what Dingo should be doing, whether at the start of the round or in the heat of battle. Just Beachy, for all of its simplicity, is not one of Dingo's best levels. He's well equipped to handle the beach balls, but the issue comes when Bonus Bank kicks in. Suddenly, Dingo needs to defend two banks at once. He should squarely stay put on the bonus bank and hope one of his teammates can cover the regular one, though in solo queue, he can maneuver between both using the beach ball if circumstances are that dire.
Here comes a giant fish!
He has a fair bit of trouble maneuvering the bonus bank as it's placed quite high. Defending gems is no problem, but Dingo can struggle to attack them due to his limited vertical mobility, even in a beach ball. At the start of the round, try to head for the enemy gems first. Climb the middle complex and then hover to the highest gems from the boombox. You can spin and super spin your way down, but make sure you get back up to high ground immediately. Tiki Towers is a blessing and a curse. On one hand, Dingo will hardly be able to help with the gems here at all, and having his back to some instant death areas can make dealing with crowds hard. On the other, it's quite straightforward to avoid an enemy bombardment, and it's easy to keep an eye out for incoming enemies. He can also quite easily make his way to the Uka Uka relic station with one super spin and momentum jump, and he will absolutely need to help his team secure this power every so often, because it's a game changer. Look out for enemy shadows trying to slam the station from above. Coco's are great at capturing this one, so mind the wall, I'll go into that in the matchup section. Should the enemy get their hands on it though, Dingo can at least put up a good fight, and stands a good chance at knocking out an Uka Uka user, removing them as a threat permanently. You'll notice that both banks are structured differently. Dingo has an easier time blocking the side overlooking the sea, because characters like Cortex and Rue can't flank him or escape to high ground. And there are more places to put the fridge that draw the enemy into disadvantageous positions. Oh, and one little tip, if you absolutely must attack the uppermost gems, Dingo's super spin lets him cross the gaps between the gems without needing to jump. Calamity Canyon is a wonderful stage for the most part. Dingo has no issue with enemy junker balls, plus there are lots of relics surrounding the bank so he can help control the nearest ball and the local force field. The ball's great mobility allows him to help out the easily accessed gems more often, while quickly returning to the bank in an emergency. He does, however, have some concerns here. The first is this high platform beside each bank. You need to control this with a power, or else you'll have to plod along to clear out a threat. Enemy Cortexes love to pester you from up here. Another is the force field. You must keep this under control, or you'll have to take the long way back to the bank. Plus, enemies can pinball you off the walls, locking you in an attack loop. You can hover around to the right of the force field, but it's rather precise. And finally, there's the epic relic station Oxide's UFO. In an ideal setting, one of your more agile teammates would distract Oxide so you can keep defending as normal. But this is Crash Team Rumble. Randoms have the game sense of a set of teaspoons. If Oxide locks onto you, you'll really struggle to defend. You can't charge a super spin without him catching you, he destroys your powers quickly, and you're easy to knock into the beam. Keeping the Junker Balls and force fields in check is more important, but should Oxide come after you,
God help you.
Rusted Refinery is already an underrated stage, but it's one of my personal favourites for Dingo, even though it has one of the most frustrating relic stations for him to handle. First off, it's very easy for Dingo to pick one of the 2 big gem clusters at the start and go and help capture it. Once that's done, he has quick access to the bank and can very easily assist with scoring once the coast is clear, thanks to an abundance of nearby crates and the banks being so close together. He has trouble clearing powers off of the gems up above, but that goes for your opponents too, so plonk fridges up there wherever you can. Sandstorm doesn't bother him one bit, while the explosive jump turns him into an absolute beast. His speed exponentially increases, especially with a super spin. It's like gaining invulnerability. And best of all, many of the level's relics spawn quite close to the banks too, so Dingo can act as a secondary booster when there's nothing to fight. So, what's the catch? Flame traps. These make keeping the force field in the canyon seem simple. Defending these stations is hard due to their small size and being surrounded by deadly pits, but you need to help your team get these as soon as possible. Stockpile 8 relics early in the match, so you can activate the one on the enemy bank. Should the enemy team get it, you'll lose access to pretty much all of your moveset, except for the regular vacuum and back pull, as the flames will catch your bulky body mid-attack and push you away. Even then, the flames can act as walls to interrupt your vac pulls, similar to how they can block the poly shots from Cortex. It's practically a free pass for the enemy to score, so get the traps before they do. Besides, Dingo's already hot enough. Buckle down, because next I have to discuss the sheer pain that is City Scrape. The only thing Dingo has going for him here is Kapunawa. There are enough relics near both banks that you can activate the station yourself. Like the explosive jump, it makes you move much faster, allowing you to occasionally help out with scoring. But more importantly, it speeds up the gains of your powers. That means more fridges and a Curry's clearance sale. Great news for you, but if the enemy team gets it instead, that's just the beginning of your problems. Now you have to deal with an endless supply of powers yourself. Flytrap spitters are already a problem for Dingo, but you'll be staring down triple the number of them than usual. You can't ignore them or you're a sitting duck for even the slowest of attacks. And speaking of distractions, turrets. They solve practical problems, like shooing Dingodile off the bank. These force you to constantly be on the move, but the moment you start combat, they're very likely to keep interrupting your attacks and leave you open to counterattack. Unfortunately, in my experience, most teams won't help you destroy these, but it's just a quick hover away to do it yourself. Of course, that also means a free scoring fiesta for the other team. So, you have plants spitting at you from one direction, turrets from another, and finally, explosives raining from the sky.
Justice reigns from above!
Drones are not much of a problem for the rest of your team, who either have the mobility to avoid them or can back off until they're gone. No such luck for Dingo. As with the turrets, he needs to constantly be on the move to avoid these. That means fewer super spins and almost no vac pulls since they stop you dead for longer. Each TNT reduces his health by half, no less. Combine this with the slowdown effects of enemy powers and turrets, and you better hope that your team has a good booster to help you out here. Insanity Caverns used to be my least favourite stage, but it's grown on me. For Dingo, it's pretty straightforward. The only relic power to worry about is Lani Loli, who honestly is no problem at all as long as you have functioning eyeballs, while you also have easy access to the high-up gems at the start of the game, plus a quick leap down to the enemy bank. This map is very much a test of your fundamentals, until someone triggers Spirit Guardians, that is. Suddenly, you're staring down enemies that no longer fear most of your attacks. Dingo is one of the better characters to at least slow the enemy guardians down by making them flinch with backpull and super spin, but it'll almost certainly be marmalized when they inevitably rush the bank en masse. There are quite a few relics in the straight line between both banks. Occasionally, you'll need to drop down and vacuum these up, help your team deposit them, and then return to the bank. Your defensive spirit guardians will often make the difference between victory and defeat, but it's a long way back to the bank, so hang back if needed, particularly if the enemy has already activated Lani Loli. Tar Valley is quite similar to Insanity Caverns, in that if the enemy team triggers the epic relic station, you're screwed. Unlike with Guardians, however, there is nothing you can do to enemies who've collected enough Aku Aku masks at all. Your only hope is that they waste their time chasing you. Well, that and the shrooms. The slow shrooms can make opponents flinch even with Aku Aku's protection. At first glance, they seem like a nightmare for Dingo, preventing him from doing anything on the bank, but they are quickly removed by sweeping the vacuum back and forth every so often, and they don't do much damage. Be sure to place any fridges to one side so that the mushrooms don't destroy them instantly. Greg will also suffer if he lands on all of them at once. As with the Guardians, if you see your booster approaching a busy Aku Aku station, go and help them secure a deposit of their relics. It's worth letting the enemy score a little every now and then, as Aku Aku is arguably the most powerful epic station in the game. If you know Aku is lost or you can't find a moment to help, hold on to 6 relics so you can trigger the slow shrooms the moment the enemy triggers Aku Aku. If your team receives Aku, let your allies break the crates first so that they can gain the invincibility and speed boost needed to score safely sooner. Once you become invincible, you can go help with scoring all the gems more often, as getting back to the enemy bank will take no time at all. It does make defending the bank a bit dull though. I mean, nothing can even touch you now.
It is I, Aku Aku. My duty is to destroy you.
Serenity Gardens is one of the most hated maps in the game, but it's not really one that bothers Dingo greatly. At the start of the round, run to the gem clusters on the enemy team's side, the furthest from where you spawn. Delay enemies there as long as you can, and then hover to the bank when you see the first scorers pour in. That's quite a lot of high ground that enemies can approach you from, but the good news is you can head up there too between battles to get the drop on enemies with a super spin. The small collection of ledges to the right of the bank offers some breathing room. Place a fridge on the outcrop above the bank and stand on these ledges for a source of healing that's tricky to get rid of. Akano is a problem for many characters, but you'll have no problem with it thanks to super spin. It doesn't really benefit Dingo himself too much. In fact, if you grab it, you can no longer stop attacks like Crash's slide spin. But hold on to a few relics anyway for when your team activates Big Bonsai. It grants decent movement speed for your team. If the game isn't too close, you can use it to go and help your team bank those stashes, using it to cross the map quickly. If the enemy activates Big Bonsai, it's pretty much business as usual. You can expect them to rush you, so keep a fridge or two stockpiled, but hopefully your team will come and help you out anyway. They'd have to be mad not to. Oh, right, randoms. Yeah, always assume that they're not coming to help. Trigger the nearby Akano to save yourself a few headaches if someone else hasn't already. 1 Akano is easy to handle, but 4 of them will aboogly bar you into the sun. Ooh, I love Surreal Summit for the most part, and all due to the relic station Ika Ika. Trigger this as often as you can. It gives Dingo amazing vertical mobility, which means free super spins whenever you like. For that reason, you should leave the bounce crates at home here. Ika Ika lets Dingo contest the high ground gems before quickly returning to the enemy bank with a big wobbly thud. And most importantly, they let him ignore the threat of the epic station, dragons. These can be frustrating because under normal circumstances, it's easy to push Dingo into them or make accidental contact getting inside the bank. You can walk under a highly placed dragon, but the slightest knock and you'll take a lot of damage. Ikarika makes it as though the dragons don't even exist, and there are often around 10 relics near the bank for you to suck up during breaks in the battles. By the way, those are some funny little dragons, aren't they? They should have been clones of Magnus. Then nothing could get past because we're all too busy wondering why he can't exist. Jazz Junction is a favourite for a lot of the player base, but I tend to be a bit meh about it.
Bam! That worked perfectly!
Your first point of call will always be the 4 gems in the middle of the stage. Stay on the high gems, as Dingo will find it harder to defend if he has to ascend. You needn't worry about the gems to the side of the bank at all, or triggering the Masquerade power. However, you do need to keep the occasional eye on Blue's beatdown. It's easy to drop from the bank, the trouble is getting back quickly. Wait until you amass a lot of relics from KOing people before helping out, if your team's close to capturing it anyway. And drop down only if the enemy is inches from securing it for themselves. There's not much space to fight here, but even if it goes wrong, you're one of the best characters to deal with an enemy blues beatdown. You can tank a lot of hits from the music while destroying the nodes fairly quickly. A fridge can negate the damage entirely. Prioritize clearing the music from the enemy bank's side, as it slows you down, a death sentence if the enemy has some flytrap spitters to stack even more slowdown on you. Keep in mind, the musicians will get rid of any fridges that you place on their pedestals, as good a place as it normally is to place one. Don't worry about the other nodes unless you're explicitly asked to help, just clear out the enemy's side and then defend as normal. I wonder what the music is, it must be really bad to do so much damage to someone. The really close proximity of the banks on bogged down means that even the most steadfast dingo will get to help out with scoring every so often. You can even score right away if you want to by slurping up the crates near the start. Better yet, the epic relic station is smack in the middle of the banks. You can use your vacuum to grab the relics over the water so that your teammates don't need to risk the jump. Don't hover over the box though, the wind jet will break it. There are usually around 4 relics within your arm's reach. Most of your relics will come from defeating enemies, however. The huge size of the banks means that there's lots of low angles to place fridges. Mix it up and keep your opponents guessing, but don't put it on the epic relic station. You'll almost never have to worry about bouncing bubbles, both triggering or using one. They're not unwelcome, but they're a long walk to get. Again, just super spin through them if the enemy team gets them. The one exception is if this ugly fella gets triggered. If you have spare relics, trigger the bouncing bubble nearest to the bat's spawn. This will let your team defend the bat much more easily, while you stay on the bank to handle sneaky scorers. If the enemy summons the bat, and especially if they trigger bouncing bubbles, approach and plow through them all with a super spin. They can't use abilities that would normally stun or stop your super spin while bubbled. Vac Pulse will only get you hurt, so for once I endorse spamming the super spin. Back off occasionally to defend the bank. You can do the most damage to the enemy bat itself with repeated regular spins, though it's a little awkward for Dingo's chain hits. Your sneakily placed fridges will let your teammates keep on attacking the bat safely while you keep the bank in check. The gems aren't so much your concern on this map, as it can take a fair bit to get in place to defend them, but you should absolutely help your team score when you're certain nobody is going to sneak onto the bank. You would think waist deep would be a problem for Dingo being so vertical, but this is actually another of my favourites for him. At the start of the match, pick the left gems and stick with them. Dingo can super spin from the top of the gems to the bottom in one go. There are 5 relics near the gems at the start of the game, 3 by the gems themselves, and 2 suspended over the circular grating. Suck these up if you can before starting to capture the gems, unless you see someone very mobile approaching like Spyro, in which case get to the gems and hold the high ground repeatedly. Once you're done here, you can cross over to help your team with the other gems if needed before dropping down. You can clear the gap between the banks with a hover from the very edge. If you do fall down, stand on the Epic Relic Station platform and do a full jump and hover to barely climb onto the bank. Watch for shadows from the grating above. Catbats and Cocos love to dive bomb you from up there. This stage's relics are in rather scattered spots. Your vacuum will reach them faster than you can, and if you get the ones inside the wind jet, you'll deny the enemy booster a double relic. But you should always try to have at least 5 relics at any time, because it's often up to you to trigger the stage's most important station, the Smog Surge. This incredibly useful power slowly saps the health of enemies, and is great for keeping the mobile ones in check, particularly Torna and Cortex. It also grants you a ridiculously good movement speed bonus, enough that you can cross the stage in mid-air with your super spin after riding the wind jets. And better still, the clouds of smoke can confuse enemies by obscuring their vision, which will really trip up crowds. You don't need to concern yourself with triggering Blog Bomber, and can easily hover over the blogs. You can for some reason slow them with your vacuum. Shrink Ray affects you the most out of anyone on the team, because suddenly the attacks you would use to extend your range have no range at all. While Smog Surge is your priority, deposit any spares into the Shrink Ray. It makes it so even your regular spin can send enemies sailing, making defense a breeze. Remember, hover jump from the middle of the station to return to the bank quickly. In the event that the enemy triggers the Shrink Ray, grab a Smog Surge ASAP. Your heightened speed will let you keep up the damage despite your smaller attack range, which also keeps you safe from the enemy's counterattacks. And your fridges? They are so tiny! Artisan's Arena is a paradise for Dingo thanks to a wealth of nearby powers that greatly benefits him and lots of relics to secure them with ease. Start by heading for the enormous 4 gems in the middle of the arena. Bap the enemies off them so that they try to attack the side clusters instead. If all goes well, you'll capture the middle gems single-handedly while your teammates take care of the sides. The moment you see someone head for the enemy bank though, get off the middle gems and stay put on the bank. You'll have delayed the middle gems long enough that your teammates can take care of them for you. Hoover up these relics on the narrow platforms the moment that they appear. They're the key to your defense. Use them to trigger the metal fairies directly behind the bank. They aren't much of a threat if the enemy team gets them, but they turn Dingo into a god. They greatly increase the knockback of his attacks, turning his vac pole into a cannon, while also preventing him from being knocked back so much, allowing safer super spins. When the coast is clear, hoover up some relics near the spawn area too. The ones on the wooden bridge are worth double the boosters. Leave them for your teammates if they're en route, but grab them before the enemy booster can, and place them in the damage fairy station. Just triggering this can save you a lot of hassle, even if you don't have time to go back and use it yourself. Remember, on this stage, you can have a metal and damage fairy equipped at the same time, turning you into the poster boy for some heavy metal album cover. Fridges get a lot of safe spots here. Place them on the narrow floating platforms where the relics spawn, on the wooden bridge behind you, and on top of the metal fairy station. Place one in the middle of the bank, and you can hover up to the high ground where the ice wizards usually roam around, giving you a little respite, or letting you deposit relics for Gulp if you have any to spare. Both the ice wizards and Gulp are no concern to you. Unless you want to watch Gulp gulping, you can happily ignore him. You can easily hover or super spin away from his blasts, plus you'll often be airborne anyway when attacking and charging up. The only downside of this level is you can't easily help your team score if they're having trouble with blockers. That's why it's important to help to trigger the damage fairy, so they can take care of it themselves. There is one big problem here though. If an enemy with projectiles stands up on the high ledge, you'll either need to waste a fridge to go up and shoo them away, or have a teammate go after them. By the time you can get up there, they'll have dropped onto the bank to score. Summer Forest was the last stage added to the game, and is a bit hit and miss for Dingo since he can't feasibly explore most of it. It's so big that he'll never have a chance to handle the side gem clusters. Instead, he should start by capturing the middle 3 gems. He's well equipped to stop opponents from jumping up the sides. Between the battles, you can climb up to these gems even when they're deactivated. You can do a super spin jump from them to reach the enemy bank and surprise them, or you can hover from the middlemost gem to reach the top of the enchanted tower. The timing is tight but great for an ambush from above. Keep an eye on the enemy tower station every so often. You needn't worry about activating it hardly makes a difference for you at all. Just stop the enemy from doing the same, so you don't have to face the frustrating explosives. If even one gets you, it's very easy to get juggled by more. There are very few relics near the bank, but you can still provide a drip feed them in exchange for the elemental orbs. Don't bother with money bags unless he's been triggered near the slope behind you, so that you can use the speed pad to return to the defense quickly.
Bruh.
The elemental orbs have a certain level of priority to grab. Get a blue one first, as Dingo loves that speed boost to bits. The occasional lightning strike can also substitute for his regular spins. Next, grab a green orb to increase Dingo's size. His super spin can now pass through obstacles like Greg. You can happily ignore the orb, but it never hurts to grab them. Since Dingo will be moving in circles a lot when defending, he finds it hard to aim or time the fireball attacks. Most importantly though, stay close to the bank at all times, even when grabbing the orbs. Even with the blue orb, it takes a good while to return to it. If the enemy triggers this power, Super Spin is your best friend. As with the Spirit Guardians, you're one of few characters who can make a large enemy flinch, and the speed can often trip up enemies as they run into your range with the blue orb. All of the abilities can destroy your powers fast, although Greg can take a few blows. Bounce crates get a good chance to shine here as a result, but if you have a fridge, you're better off saving it until the rush of enemies and orb powers drops off. The fuck? Here's an at-a-glance tier list of how I personally think Dingo's matchups go. And yes, I know that's a bit of an odd place for Coco. We'll go over them in order of easiest to hardest. I've had some outside help for explaining how these go, so special thanks will be given as we come across them. Spyro is your easiest matchup by far. Dingo's super spin alone negates pretty much anything the little fella can do. His only means of attacking you would be to charge you between super spins and to flame you. Flames aren't too threatening to Dingo's large health pool at least. They're only a worry on waist deep when you're affected by a shrink ray. Just mix up your super spin timings, throw in the occasional regular spin if you don't have time to charge, and vac pull a headstrong Spyro to catch them off guard. Don't worry about Dragon Spyro out of the air. Just spin to win. You'll probably just scare him away, and you'll never catch up to him, but you don't need to. Your teammates can finish him off at best, and you completely stop his scoring efforts at worst. The only time he's a threat is if he brings Minefield with him, as even though you can easily destroy the mines faster than Radical can destroy a franchise, you're such a big target that they may catch you as they spawn, but that's more than Minefield's power than his. Sorry Spyro, you might be my favourite character besides Dingo, but you're Dingo food in Rumble. Cat Bat's a frustrating experience for newcomers. You can't hit them in the air easily, and if you try and vac pull them, they'll easily dive bomb you. Regular spins trade with their dives, and they can quickly toss a burger at you when you approach to stop a score. It's a guaranteed hit. But the answer to everything here is the same as for Spyro. Super Spin. It sends Cat Bat packing when they dive, no matter how powerful the dive was. If you can't charge a Super Spin, you can observe their diving patterns. Even if they cancel a dive in mid-air, 9 out of 10 times they're low enough to the ground that you can punish them with a regular spin or even a vac pull. Basically, let Cat Bat be the aggressor and punish their attack attempts until they back off. Keeping track of their jumps and shadows helps a lot too.
No!
Fighting a good Tropy can be a headache, not for her power or her combos, but for her trip barrier. It has the same problem as a Cat Bat burger in that it simply won't miss you, but it can be used more frequently than the burger and has the danger of locking you in a melee combo barrier loop if you can't back away. Most Tropy players will try and dance around you in the air to make you panic about where they're going and maybe make you waste the vac pull on them. They aren't able to ascend so much that you can't hit them with regular spins after a hover jump. Play a patient spacing game, bap them away with the regular spin if they get in your face, and then look for a vac pull opportunity once you know where they're going. Make them try to close the gap on you and pull when they approach head on. You won't have many opportunities to super spin in this matchup unless you circle around them, as it only makes it easier for the trip barrier to snag you. Force them to play on your level and you'll do just fine. Oh, and as for the ones that just spam the slam, vac pull and punish, easy as pie. I don't tend to look forward to fighting Brio often. For some reason, when they start hopping around like this, they become really hard to hit. In theory, your regular spin can punish them, as with Tropy, but a stray potion or two will often catch you in turn. Instead, trick them into dancing in circles as they do, step back, and then vac pull them. Brio is far too slow to retreat its range by moving backwards or to the side. His only option is to move towards you. If you space it just right, you'll always get the punish. A majority of Brios like to use bounce crates to help them transform into brute form. You can't outrun their blast if you're up close, but they're no issue if you've been backpulling from a safe distance. You can also just keep the regular vacuum trained on Brio to really get in their heads. They have no easy way of dodging it and it slows them to a crawl. Now as for brute form, your average Brio will try to use bounce crates at ground level and start drinking the Coca-Cola immediately. You have a window of opportunity to stop them from transforming just as they touch the ground. A regular spin is enough, but if you're proactive you'll have time for a super spin too. Higher level Brios will gain more airtime with their slimes before bouncing further if needed. That's called a slime ladder. Your only shot is to stand to the side of Brio and destroy the bottommost slimes as soon as possible to prevent him from bouncing up in the first place. Odds are he's gonna get away with it, but if he does, Dingo is one of the only characters who can knock Brio back during the change. Place a fridge down nearby and repeatedly super spin into Brio. You'll either trade favourably in the damage or cause him to waste the form destroying your fridge, by which time you still get to trade favourably. For the most part, however, you won't be facing too many Brios because he likes to stay put on the enemy bank just like you do. It's also worth noting that slime ladders are banned in true competitive play, so if you see one using one, the Brio is nothing but a criminal. Next up is the main character himself, that's right, it's his Team Rumble. Crash is one of the more aggressive scorers and can mix up his attacks a lot, cancelling body slams, air slides, slide spins. Crash keeps many a blocker on their toes. Your regular spin can interrupt a Crash about to super slam, but is itself interrupted by air slides and normal body slams. Your super spin is one of the few moves that can stop Crash from slide spinning all over the place. You'll both get knocked away, but as Crash has considerably less health than Dingo, it's more than worth it. Hop on a fridge and he can't stop your charge.
Got to hold on to your Happy Meal when this bandicoot's around.
In the event that you can't super spin, watch how Crash slides. Many will slide back and forth in the same two directions, move to the side, and Vakpul to either interrupt the slide midway or catch him at his destination. Vakpul is also your go-to punish if they body slam. Your super spin makes it considerably easier for Crash to start slamming you. Get close enough to knock him away, then immediately move backwards and cancel your spin. His slam will whiff and you can punish. You can also jump into Crash to hit him twice, if the space allows you to, as many will try to body slam you again straight away. In the event that Crash does squish you, shuffle off the back of the bank for a moment, as most will attempt to slam you again. It must feel very nice to belly flop Dingo's Chonk.
I feel pretty!
In a duel with another Dingodile, it's all about the mind games, which is why I'm absolutely awful at Dingo 1v1s. My mind is the boggled equivalent of an Ed, Ed and Eddie sound effect.
You have vandalized Rolf's face!
The whole mind games thing is why I compared him to Reinhardt in Overwatch. A duel between these two is about whoever makes the first silly move. Everything in Dingo's moveset is capable of countering another of his own moves, so what starts as a game of rock, paper, scissors becomes a game of prediction. Vakpul punishes Super Spin, Super Spin punishes Regular Spin, and Regular Spin punishes Vakpul. Throw in the odd regular vacuum to gain that little bit of edge in battle. In the 1v1, whoever drops their fridge first is at a big disadvantage, since it doesn't take too long for you to destroy it, and even if you do take a hit, you can follow up with your own. Besides which, the more fridges you can force the enemy Dingo to waste on you, the fewer he has for blocking other players. Move side to side with hovers, walk back and forth with your vacuum on, don't be hyper aggressive, and look for a laggy move that you can punish. And for goodness sake, if he starts spamming spins on you, back off and get some breathing room. May the best Chonk win! Coco is often cited as being hard countered by Dingo, but there's a simple reason this isn't true, and while I bet the more pro players are getting ready to chew me out for this, hear me out. First off though, she shares a body slam attack with Crash, so the same tactics to counter a slam spammer apply to her. If she counters a butt slam in midair, keep in mind that it still sends her momentum to a near dead stop. Hop aside and use either the super spin, regular spin, or ideally the Vakpul towards you. Her aerial spiral is no threat to you at all, both your regular and super spins power through it. When she becomes a nuisance is the wall. This single move is why I find Coco a much tougher matchup than Crash for Dingo. Unlike his slide spin, you cannot trade with the wall. You must always ensure that Coco is not snuck onto the bank behind your back. If she puts up a wall halfway through scoring, it becomes a lot harder to stop her, especially during a crowded fight. This isn't to say the wall is unstoppable. Stay on the defense, control the middle of the bank, and try to pressure the Coco to put the wall up just for you. As long as she didn't sneak up behind you, you'll have more than enough time to stop her than you might think. The first way is to walk around to the Finn side of the wall and Vakpul. This attack passes through the wall from this angle unless she stands right in the middle, not easy in a chaotic battle. However, on most occasions, a Coco will have their back to a ledge or a bottomless pit. This is where the second method comes in handy. The wall always deactivates with the same timing and takes just under 4 seconds to be active again. The moment the wall goes down, you're free to punish the Coco any way you like. Try a regular spin and watch how she reacts. If she tries to squash you, don't focus on punishing her as soon as you're unsquashed. Instead, retreat a little and reset the battle to a more neutral stance. Also be mindful that Coco's wall and spins together can damage your fridge very fast, and if she squashes you, spins you, and then puts a wall on your body, she can remove half your health in one go. Avoid putting the fridge on the bank against her, as she can put herself between it and the wall, likewise for Greg. Something very important which leads to the third way to deal with walls. Whenever Coco puts one up, it's always in the direction she's facing, and has a brief wind-up. Seen the wall coming? Pull in advance and drag her clean through it. The timing is tight, but even if you get it wrong, you have plenty of time to punish her anyway when the wall goes down.
That's right, away you go!
Engine is...
I forgot what I was going to say! Wait! I got it!
Engine is regarded as the weakest character in the game. That is, if you're a semi-mobile character who can better equip flytrap spitters or punish Engine in the air. Unfortunately, Dingo has none of these advantages, so there are only two options for him. The first is to challenge Engine to airspace on his ascent.
Hop onto a fridge, hop off, and use the vac pole if you can read their movement, or a super spin to cover maximum vertical range. Engine has very low health, so it only takes 2 solid hits to get him to run away. Easier said than done, of course. If you can't follow him into the air, watch his shadow. Always expect a boombox to be dropped at the peak of his jump. Jump and hover in advance. As long as you aren't touching the ground when it lands, it won't bother you. Watch what happens when Engine approaches the ground. Many will try to use their booster jets to knock you away. If you can condition them to do this, you'll have no problem following the shadow and punishing their landing with a vac pole. You can also try to super spin against the landing so that you destroy the boombox at the same time as hitting him. Engine is a nightmare if you have to face him in a crowd, but one-on-one he's more than manageable. Like Coco, Engine becomes a significantly greater threat in a group, but it's also worth saying that any of his problematic moves require him to be airborne. You'll always be wasting his time because if he lands for an extended time against you, he dies. Ripperoo seems like a nightmare on leg day at first, but he has some weaknesses you can take advantage of. First off, his kicks are no match for your super spins, although I'm not quite sure how regular spins interact with the kicks at all. You can knock him out of his cannon with any attack except for the regular vacuum if he tries to retreat but didn't bounce high enough. A Roo firing himself directly into you should be no problem if you aren't distracted. But we all know what Roo likes best.
Bombs!
Uh-huh. And?
Get this! More bombs!
The good news is that every time Roo hops on a bomb, you have just under a second window to punish him with any attack. Start with regular spins or vac poles if you feel confident about your range. Once you have the momentum, you can start using super spins more often. Dodging the bombs is as simple as hovering over them or moving sideways, but be careful not to make a beeline straight for Roo or you'll make yourself predictable. Good Roos can stay ridiculously airborne. Your super spin becomes more vital here. Aim to clip the Roo from beneath and spin right into his toenails. Knocking Roo away even once can force him to set up again, giving you a significant advantage. Use your fridge to gain some height so that your super spins can connect easier. Keep in mind that standing on the fridge won't save you from the bomb's blast radius, neither you nor all of your Cravendale milk that you keep in there. Ripto used to be one of Dingo's easiest matchups. He had very little health, hardly did any damage, and if he missed his only threatening move, the Tsunami, he was free to punish for a very long time. Now he can do this. Alright, go shorty. Ripto's fireballs have a level of tracking on them, similar to Alora's tornadoes when first fired, but we'll get to her later. But they don't arc, so you can move diagonally forward and over them like they were Ripperoo's bombs. But don't get too close. The idea is to make it look like you're going for a close-up attack and force them to use Tsunami. When they do, you can out-prioritize it with your super spin. And if you miss, follow the shadow and punish the landing just like Engine. Do not give predictable chase after them across deadly pits. Their lightning will almost certainly spike you to your death.
You little
As you start hovering, wiggle back and forth to bait the bolt. You'll have plenty of time to land and jump to hover across safely. Though make sure you have enough space to move around in case of an inevitable return fire Tsunami. Finishing off a low health Ripto with the regular vacuum goes a long way, but don't feel discouraged if you can't KO them. They want you to chase them and get frustrated. Simply forcing them back or wasting their cooldowns is enough to give your team a big advantage, especially in a group fight. Ripto's fireballs alone are unlikely to win the day. Elora is a big problem if she's given the space that she needs. You're a big flabby target for her tornadoes, however they can be hover jumped around and over with some careful sideways movement. The trick is to move sideways, hover jump, and then quickly turn in a different direction, closing up the gap slowly. The problem with this matchup is quite simple. Unless you can make Elora come to you, or your teammates can keep up the pressure, you're not going to KO her. For one thing, her mobility is crazy, being able to cross the map very fast compared to other blockers, and being able to go well out of your reach in the sky to heal up. You can certainly weaken her and force her to back off and heal, but that's all you can do. It's tricky to find a safe moment to super spin against Elora, as she can rapidly close the gap and flash kick you. Vac Pull is your best friend here. Maneuver around the tornadoes and preemptively start your pull before Elora can shoot another tornado or kick you. Ultimately, Elora isn't the biggest threat to you compared to others, but at the same time, she's not a target you're well equipped to defeat alone. Hey look, I managed to get through the whole thing without making a joke about her being a fawn, you damn it.
Torna is deaf if he was blonde, sassy, and reaped with a hookshot instead of a scythe. She's a menace to the majority of the roster, and Dingo is no exception. In fact, it's arguably worse for him, because she's got more to grapple onto. Mercifully, however, she's not impossible to fight. In order to deal the most damage to you, she must approach you first. Move sideways and hover frequently as you do so. Once she's sent out a hookshot, she's dedicated to the direction it goes. Mostly, but we'll come back to that. Continue moving sideways, turn to face her, and Vakpul to punish. If you time it right, you'll cancel her uppercut attacks and do a massive chunk of damage. You can also back off while charging a super spin, wait for her to close the gap, and then punish. Only the hookshot itself can stun Dingo out of the super spin. Her dash itself and the uppercuts lose to you. Better Tornas can cancel their hookshots to try and bait out a whiff Vakpul or super spin. Rely more on your regular spins instead. Your fridge is crucial for blocking hookshots against these Tornas, and can set you up for a safe pull or super spin as they attack the wrong target, particularly if you stand on top of it. Stand back if you're behind it though, or you'll still be hit and stunned. She's tough, but she's not impossible, don't give up. Oh, and word to the wise, if you do get hit by the uppercut on the Finn stage, prepare to hover quickly. Her second attack has a habit of spiking you in weird angles. Dr. Cortex is and always will be the hardest counter to Dingodile.
I'm an evil scientist, what do you expect?
His auto-aiming laser pistol piles on constant damage that never misses. He can interrupt all of your attacks with his transformation shot, and you're a huge target for his pianos. Not to mention, he can constantly dash out of range of anything you could do to punish him. Bad Cortexes will neglect to space themselves properly, letting you punish the end of their dashes with a forward-jumping Vakpul. They'll also rely too heavily on the transformation shot. As with Torna, move sideways and diagonally to avoid this. One trick I love to do is stand a short distance away and begin super spinning, edge to the left or the right to dodge the transform shot, and then rapidly close in for the big hit. The super spin will also prevent Cortex from dashing through you to escape and do some damage. Most Cortex players use either the Flytrap Spitter or a fridge of their own. While you're busy taking these down, you're an easier target for pianos and polymorphs. Weave in and out of the power's range, hovering and hitting the power with a regular spin before retreating and going again. This lessens the chance of a hit, but doesn't guarantee a dodge. Hovering is wonderful when Dingo gets slowed by a spitter because it helps him move faster. Also, an enemy fridge can be used to block a polymorph shot just as much as your own fridge. Make use of terrain elevations when possible to make it harder for him to keep track of you. Otherwise, yeah, I can't lie, this might be the single hardest counter to a character in the game. You'll absolutely need a teammate's help against a good Cortex, but an average one is very possible to beat with careful movement. Good luck!
But Dr. Cortex, who says he invented many things...
Dingodile is a big, squishy target, and easily pressured into submission if he can't find a way to fight back. To win as him, you need to be a wobbly wall that strikes fear into anyone who dares challenge him alone. Pressure your opponent into certain moves, make them get sloppy, and then punish them for it. Dingo thrives at controlling a fixed area, and struggles when he needs to give chase or regain control of an area. Although his moves don't require much technical finesse, he has a deceptively high skill ceiling for making the most of them. Keep your opponent second guessing and then third guessing, and you'll soon add them to Dingo's ample stomach mass.
Easy, chums. If I was here to fight, you'd be Cactus.
I hope that this guide has inspired you or taught you some new tricks. Hopefully, I'll catch you in Crash Team Rumble soon, where you can promptly destroy me with my own tactics. I was never the brightest light bulb in the Don't Ask Hot Pot. See you soon!